The sun over Clearview Airfield was already casting sharp golden rays across the tarmac, bouncing off polished metal and dust alike. The breeze was dry, warm, and restless, kicking up small clouds of grit that swirled around the tires of a sleek black Porsche Cayenne as it rolled to a smooth stop in front of Hangar 12. Right on time, 8:32 a.m. sharp. Malik Carter stepped out of the car, calm and unrushed. He moved with the kind of quiet precision that comes from doing this exact thing many times before. Navy suede bomber jacket over a fitted black crew neck, pristine white sneakers, sunglasses hooked on the collar of his shirt. He looked like someone important, but not in a rush to prove it. A young ramp worker standing nearby nodded at him quickly, then turned back toward the back of the hangar. Malik gave a slight nod and kept walking, heading directly toward the Falcon 8X waiting for him on the tarmac, stairs lowered, engines in prep. The aircraft shimmered subtly under the morning sun. This was a routine flight. Clearview to St. Louis, where he had scheduled meetings with distribution execs and a potential investor group. Malik wasn't in the mood to chat. His mind was already occupied with restructuring timelines, product cost margins, and trying to convince his CTO to greenlight a bold expansion. As he placed a foot on the bottom stair, a sharp voice sliced through the hum of the morning. "Excuse me, sir." Malik turned his head slightly. A tall man in a sharply pressed flight uniform was walking briskly toward him. Slim build, late 50s maybe, aviator sunglasses, the kind of presence that expects authority to be automatic. "Can I help you with something?" Malik asked, neither defensive nor irritated, just curious. The man stopped a few feet away, eyes scanning Malik head to toe. "This jet's scheduled for a private departure. I need to see ID and flight confirmation. We don't allow unverified passengers to approach the aircraft." Malik raised an eyebrow, just slightly. For a second, he thought maybe this was a joke, but the man's face was all seriousness. No smile, no confusion, just suspicion. "I own that jet," Malik said, voice even. "I'm the one flying to Missouri this morning." The pilot didn't budge. "Right, and I'm a movie star," he muttered, arms crossed tight. Malik let out a short laugh, the kind that comes when you're deciding whether to correct someone or just let them fall. "You can radio operations. My name should be on the manifest." The man gave a half snort and tapped his radio. "I don't care what name you give me. You're not stepping foot on this aircraft until I hear otherwise from someone above me." Malik didn't raise his voice. His hands stayed at his sides. He'd been in situations like this before, not always this blunt but close. Still, something about this one felt heavier. "Security will be here shortly," the man added. "They'll sort this out." "You're going to feel real foolish in about 2 minutes, Malik said, his tone casual but direct. The pilot smirked, clearly unconvinced. Malik pulled out his phone, dialed, and held it to his ear. "Hey, it's me," he said. "Might want to get someone on the radio at Clearview. The pilot's not letting me board. Yeah, no clue who I am. I'll wait." As he ended the call, a matte black SUV pulled up behind them, marked with the airfield's private security logo. 2 men exited, one already scanning the scene. They approached the pilot first. "This gentleman says he owns the plane," the pilot said, arms still crossed. "Refused to show ID. I wasn't taking any chances." One of the guards glanced toward Malik, eyes narrowed for a split second before his expression shifted completely. Recognition. "Wait, Mr. Carter?" Malik nodded. "That's me." The guard turned to the pilot. "Sir, I'd recommend checking with dispatch now." But what happened next would change everything. The pilot's face froze, jaw tightening slightly. He glanced between the security guard and Malik like he was trying to do the math but didn't like the result. "Wait, you're who?" he asked, lowering the radio halfway from his mouth. "Malik Carter," Malik repeated, his voice calm. "And no, I'm not some investor. I own the company, all of it." The words landed hard. There was a visible shift, not just in the pilot's body language, but in the air between them. The guard didn't move, but his eyes stayed trained on the pilot now. The pilot let out a slow breath, masking disbelief with fatigue. "I've been in this industry 20 years, he muttered, mostly to himself. "I've never seen the owner just show up like that. The way you arrived, the way you're dressed, it just didn't add up." And there it was. Not the policy, not the procedure, the assumption, the jacket, the sneakers, the skin. It didn't look like ownership to him. And that was the problem. Malik didn't flinch, didn't escalate. "You ever consider," he asked, voice steady, "that maybe you just don't recognize power when it doesn't look like you expect it to?" The question hung in the air like jet fuel, heavy and flammable. The pilot didn't respond. Malik's phone buzzed in his hand. He stepped a few feet away and picked up. "Yeah, still here. He's looking at me like I'm the valet. Nah, no need to rush. Dispatch just confirmed everything. They're talking to security now." One of the guards cleared his throat, turning to the pilot again. "Sir, dispatch is asking for your direct acknowledgement." Still trying to salvage his posture, the pilot raised the radio again. "Base, this is Captain Edmund Wyatt at Hangar 12. I've got a Mr. Carter here, says he owns Vanguard Air, claims the aircraft is his." There was a pause, just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Then a voice came through. Quiet, official, and final. "Yes, Captain, that's correct. Mr. Carter is the sole owner of Vanguard. You are to stand down immediately." The pilot stiffened. He didn't speak, didn't blink. Malik just looked at him. He didn't need an apology, he needed clarity. Wyatt lowered the radio. His voice was flatter now, smaller. There must have been a communication breakdown. Malik didn't smile, didn't offer him a lifeline. "I didn't realize I needed to give anyone a heads up before boarding my own plane," he said, voice like a blade. Nobody moved. Even the second security guard now had his arms crossed, not in defense but in quiet judgment. The first guard stepped aside. "All clear on our end, Mr. Carter." And just then, a new voice crackled through the pilot's radio. It was louder this time, and Malik caught enough to know it wasn't routine. "Captain Wyatt, stand by. You are relieved of duty immediately. Do not initiate the flight. Do not interact with the client further." Wyatt's eyes widened slightly. He lowered the radio again, this time like it weighed more than it had a minute ago. The reality sank in. This wasn't just a moment, it was a consequence. Captain Wyatt stepped back from the group, his face pale beneath the golden sunlight. He glanced at the jet, his jet, or so he thought 10 minutes ago. The same jet he'd flown to Palm Springs, Dallas, and Miami. The one he talked about with pride at airman lounges and private dinners. And now? The man he tried to block from the steps owned it, owned the company, owned him. The radio crackled again. A new voice, smoother, female, authoritative. "Captain Wyatt, please report to Terminal Office 3. Do not proceed with any duties. Do not engage further." Wyatt didn't respond. He just dropped his hand to his side and stared at the tarmac. Malik took a breath through his nose. Not frustration, not relief. Just the kind of breath you let out when something predictable still hits different when it actually happens. He turned to the guards. "Thanks. I think we're good here." One of them nodded and headed back toward the SUV. The other lingered for just a moment longer, watching Wyatt slowly walk toward the terminal, his posture deflated. Malik didn't watch him go. No gloating, no smirk. He looked down at his watch, then up at the jet. The co-pilot, a younger man, early 30s maybe, had stepped halfway down the aircraft stairs. His expression was neutral, but unsure. He hadn't spoken the whole time. Now he gave Malik a respectful nod and stepped aside. "Apologies for the delay, Mr. Carter," he said quietly. Malik looked at him. No irritation, just calm. "You flying this today? If you'd like me to, sir, I'm cleared." Malik studied him for a second, then gave a single nod and walked up the stairs without another word. Inside, the cabin was sleek and silent. Cream leather seats, walnut trim, polished steel accents. Everything about it said understated power. He tossed his bag onto the forward seat and sat, rolling up a sleeve as he reached for his tablet. The aircraft door shut behind him with a solid thump. Engines powered up. Checklists were recited from the cockpit. But Malik? He was already elsewhere. Not thinking about Wyatt anymore. Not directly, at least. 2 months earlier, a similar flight had changed everything. He was flying back from a quiet deal closing in Scottsdale and boarded a chartered jet like always. This one wasn't Vanguard. It was a different company. He arrived on time. He dressed the same, but the pilot barely looked at him. Said, "Welcome aboard," like it was a formality he wished he could skip. Malik didn't care, at least not right away, but during the flight little things added up. Slower service, cold tone. The pilot addressing his assistant as if she was the client, barely acknowledging Malik at all. Nothing overt, just cold, forgettable if it wasn't familiar. When they landed in Boston, Malik didn't say a word, but when he got home he poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared at the wall, then picked up the phone. He called his lawyer, Gwen Maxine, a silent storm in a tailored suit based in Redwood, and said, "Find out who owns that air charter company. Quietly. I want it in 30 days. She didn't even blink. 6 weeks after that call to Gwen, Malik quietly became the controlling stakeholder of Vanguard Air. No headlines, no handshakes, just power moving behind closed doors. He didn't visit the headquarters. Didn't demand they name the jets after him. That wasn't the point. The point was, they would know who signed the checks, and they would think twice before assuming what leadership should look like. That flight back in Scottsdale wasn't an isolated incident. It was the spark. The real fire had been building for years. In meetings where executives assumed he was someone's assistant. In lobbies where he was asked if he was waiting for the real client. In offices where people looked at his shoes before listening to his ideas. He never lost his temper. He took notes. Buying Vanguard wasn't revenge, it was a checkmate. Back in the present, the jet lifted off the runway. Malik leaned back, screen on his lap glowing with incoming notifications. Emails, news alerts, and texts were flooding in. One subject line stood out, "You're trending." Apparently, someone had filmed the entire confrontation from behind a fuel truck. The clip was short, less than a minute, but it had already gone viral. It showed Malik standing still, calm, while Captain Wyatt barked orders. The clearest line in the audio? You ever think maybe you can't recognize power when it doesn't look like what you're used to? That sentence hit the internet like a lightning strike. By the time they touched down in St. Louis, the video had millions of views. His phone had exploded. 3 missed calls from Gwen. 4 from unknown numbers. Dozens of texts. Even his assistant messaged, "You cooked that pilot. Also, you're on CNN." Malik didn't respond. He just stared out the SUV window on the ride to his hotel. Not at the city, but at his own reflection. At the hotel, Malik walked through the lobby like nothing had happened. but people noticed. A woman near the coffee bar mouthed, "That's him." Someone else lifted their phone, pretending not to record. He didn't break stride, just took the elevator to the penthouse, sat at the table, and opened his laptop. Waiting for him, a formal report from HR, a drafted apology from Captain Wyatt, a request to reconsider the termination. Wyatt's message wasn't remorseful, it was careful, full of phrases like miscommunication, standard protocol, and long career of professionalism. But nowhere in it did he ask the right question. How did it feel to be denied access to your own plane? Malik read the message twice, then deleted it. He called Gwen. "Let me guess," she said. "You've made your decision." "Yeah, he's done." "Quiet or public?" "Not this time," Malik replied. "If this were anyone else, he'd already be gone. I'm not teaching people that a well-worded excuse matters more than the assumptions they carry." Gwen paused, then said, "I'll handle it." Malik stood up and sent a final message to operations. Effective immediately, Captain Wyatt is permanently removed. Severance optional, no further involvement. No exclamation marks, no emotion, just business. He walked out onto the balcony. The city below buzzed like usual. Cars, meetings, morning noise. But Malik wasn't interested in noise. He cared about standards. Letting Wyatt stay would send the wrong message. That ownership is only valid if it looks a certain way. That an apology can undo bias. And Malik wasn't building a company like that. He built rooms where people didn't have to prove they belonged, where your value wasn't decided by your clothes, age, or color, just your work, your integrity. He stood still for a moment, then turned back inside and closed the door behind him. 3 days later, Malik was back in Oakland. The trending hashtags had faded. A new scandal had taken over the headlines. That's how the internet works. Fast outrage, faster distractions. But the video kept spreading quietly. A few million views became 15, then 30. Podcasters, creators, commentators. Everyone had something to say. Some applauded Malik's calm. Others questioned Captain Wyatt's intentions. But Malik didn't join the noise. He never did. The emails that followed weren't from reporters or opportunists. They were personal. A baggage handler from Minneapolis wrote, "Man, I work these flights every day, and people look at me like I couldn't possibly know what I'm doing. Seeing how you handled that gave me hope." A woman in Arizona shared her story. "I run a charter company. I've seen this happen. Thank you for setting a new standard." And there were dozens more. Not performance. Real people. Real impact. That evening, Malik walked through the quiet hangar at Vanguard's new West Coast facility. It was peaceful. One jet stood in the center, the Falcon 8X from that morning. He didn't approach it, just looked for a while. Before he left, he passed by a bulletin board near the employee lounge. It held birthdays, safety notices, and something new. A printed mission statement. Not written by Malik, but inspired by something he once said. "Respect doesn't come from how loud you speak. It comes from how you carry the silence." He smiled. Not big, just enough. Then he walked to his car and drove off into the night. No headlines, no victory speech, because the message had already been sent. Sometimes you don't have to prove who you are. You just have to hold your ground and let the truth speak louder than their assumptions.